They call him the philosopher of pessimism, the man who told the world that existence itself is suffering, that desire traps us, that the very force animating reality is blind, unconscious, insatiable. But Arthur Schopenhauer did not start here. He arrived at this vision through a specific mental process, a sequence of realizations that began not in despair but in curiosity. In 1814, in a small town in Germany, in an inn named Zum Ritter, a 25-year-old man sits with a book written in Latin. The book is called Underwent. It is a French scholar's translation from Persian, which itself was translated from Sanskrit. The text is nearly incomprehensible, but something in those pages strikes him like lightning. What he reads there will reshape his entire understanding of what desire is, what reality is, and what you are underneath the surface of your thoughts. The question is not whether desire controls you. The question is whether you are desire itself, wearing the mask of a human being. The family was wealthy. Arthur was educated in France and England as a boy, spoke multiple languages by age 12. The plan was merchant work like his father, but something in him resisted. In 1805, his father died. He fell from a warehouse loft in Hamburg. Suicide, some said. Arthur was 17. He worked as a merchant apprentice for 2 years in Hamburg, hated every minute. By 1809, he convinced his mother to let him pursue education instead. He entered the University of Göttingen in 1809 at age 21. Late start for academic life. He studied medicine first, physics, zoology, psychology, physiology. He took courses with Gottlob Ernst Schulze, who taught him metaphysics and logic. Schulze told him to concentrate on two thinkers, Plato and Immanuel Kant. That advice changed everything. Kant had said, reality divides into two realms. Phenomena, the world as it appears to us. Noumena, the world as it exists in itself, independent of our perception. We can never know the thing in itself, Kant argued. We only know appearances shaped by our mental structures, space and time and causality. Schopenhauer absorbed this, but he saw a gap. If we can never know the thing in itself, then philosophy hits a wall. We are locked inside our own heads, staring at shadows. Schopenhauer moved to Berlin in 1811. He attended lectures by Johann Gottlieb Fichte, one of the most famous philosophers in Germany. Fichte argued that the self creates reality through its own activity. The ego posits the world. Schopenhauer found this absurd, empty wordplay. He also attended lectures by Friedrich Schleiermacher, a theologian. He disliked him too. He saw academic philosophy as compromised, infected by religious agendas, disconnected from genuine questions. By 1813, Napoleon's army was approaching Berlin. War was spreading. Schopenhauer fled south to Rudolstadt, a small town near Weimar. He took a room at an inn called Zum Ritter. There, in solitude, he wrote his doctoral dissertation. The title was On the Fourfold Root of the Principle of Sufficient Reason. He finished it in the summer of 1813. The University of Jena awarded him a doctorate. He was 25 years old. In late 1813, Meyer introduced Schopenhauer to something that would change the direction of his thought. He told him about the Upanishads, ancient Indian philosophical texts. Meyer spoke of a Latin translation, published in 1801 and 1802 by a French scholar named Abraham Hyacinthe Anquetil Duperron. Duperron had traveled to India between 1754 and 1761. He learned Persian. He found a Persian translation of the Upanishads made by Prince Dara Shikoh in the 17th century. Duperron translated this Persian text into Latin. The result was called Underwent. The translation was cryptic, nearly unreadable. It passed from Sanskrit to Persian to Latin. It mixed Upanishadic thought with Sufi mysticism and Neoplatonism, but it was all Europe had. In December 1813, library records show Schopenhauer borrowed a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. He started reading. In March 1814, he borrowed the Underwent from the Weimar Library, 2 volumes. On March 26, 1814, the book was in his hands. He opened it. He read. What he found there shook him. The Upanishads taught that the world we perceive is Maya, illusion. That beneath appearances lies Brahman, the ultimate reality. That the self, Atman, is identical with Brahman. That individual existence is an illusion created by ignorance. That desire binds us to the cycle of suffering. That liberation comes through renunciation, through seeing through the veil. Schopenhauer saw parallels with Kant. Kant's phenomena matched Maya. Kant's noumena matched Brahman, but the Upanishads went further. They claimed we can know the thing in itself, not through reason or perception, but through direct inner experience. He read it before sleeping every night for the rest of his life. He called it the consolation of his life and the consolation of his death. He said reading it was the most elevating experience possible in the world. In Dresden, from 1815 to 1817, his neighbor was a man named Karl Christian Friedrich Krause. Krause was a philosopher and a Freemason. He knew Sanskrit. He was a panentheist, believing the universe exists within God, but God exceeds the universe. Krauss introduced Schopenhauer to more Indian texts, to articles in the Asiatisches magazine. They discussed meditation techniques. Krause gave Schopenhauer something close to expert guidance on Indian thought. This was the crucible. Dresden, 1814 to 1818, 4 years. Schopenhauer started with Kant's framework. The world divides into appearance and reality. We know appearances through perception. Reality remains hidden. Then he added the insight from the Upanishads. We do have access to reality, but not through external perception. The access point is internal. Then came the breakthrough. He looked at his own body. Your body exists in 2 ways, he realized. You perceive your body as an object in space. A surgeon can cut into it, measure it, observe it from outside. But you also experience your body from inside. You feel hunger, you feel pain, you feel the urge to move, you feel desire. This inner experience is not mediated by space or causality. It is immediate, it is direct. When you want to lift your arm, there is no chain of causes you observe. The wanting and the moving are one act, experienced from within. This inner experience is not a representation. It is the thing itself. The force that makes your heart beat, makes you hungry, makes you seek pleasure and avoid pain. This will is not rational. It does not think. It does not plan. It simply wants. It strives. It pushes forward blindly. And here is the key realization. If your body, viewed from inside, is will, then by analogy, every other body must also be will. The universe is not made of matter plus mind. It is will objectifying itself into representations. The thing in itself, the reality behind appearances, is will. Not your individual will, not consciousness, but a single, universal, blind, unconscious will that manifests as everything, as gravity, as magnetism, as growth, as desire, as the force that drives all of nature. What you see around you, the world of objects in space and time, is will making itself visible. The rock is will. The tree is will. The animal is will. You are will. The difference is only the level of objectification. In inorganic matter, will appears as basic forces: gravity, magnetism, chemical affinity. In plants, will appears as life, growth, reproduction. In animals, will appears as instinct, motion, desire. In humans, will becomes conscious of itself. But consciousness does not create will. Consciousness is a tool of the will, evolved to serve its purposes. You think you make choices, you think you have free will, but underneath you are driven by the same blind force that drives everything else. You are will, temporarily individuated, temporarily conscious, but fundamentally identical with all existence. From 1814 to 1818 in Dresden, he wrote this out. He called the book The World as Will and Representation. He completed the manuscript in March 1818. It was published in December 1818 with the date 1819 on the title page. He was 30 years old, 4 books. The first book explained representation, the world as we perceive it. The second book explained will, the inner nature of reality. The third book explained aesthetics, how we can temporarily escape the will. The fourth book explained ethics, how we can deny the will and achieve liberation. The whole system was there. He thought it would change philosophy forever. It made no impression. Almost nobody read it. Silence. Walking on the Lido beach in Venice, he saw Byron on horseback. His female companion swooned at the sight of the famous poet. Schopenhauer, offended by her reaction, tore up the letter. He never met Byron. In 1820, he applied to lecture at the University of Berlin. Hegel had arrived there in 1818 to take Fichte's prestigious chair. Hegel was the most famous philosopher in Germany at the time. His lectures drew hundreds of students. Schopenhauer made a strange request. He wanted his lectures scheduled at the exact same time as Hegel's, a direct challenge. The faculty was appalled by the arrogance. Hegel himself seemed unconcerned and allowed it. In March 1820, Schopenhauer began teaching. The course was called Universal Philosophy. 5 students registered. Hegel's lectures had over 200. The next semester, 0 students signed up for Schopenhauer's course. It was canceled. That was the end of his academic career. He was 32 years old. Gravity is the desire of matter to attract other matter. Magnetism is the desire of opposite poles to unite. Growth is the desire of organisms to expand. Reproduction is the desire of life to perpetuate itself. In animals, desire becomes more complex. Hunger, thirst, the drive to mate, the instinct to flee danger. In humans, desire becomes infinitely multiplied. We want food, we want shelter, we want sex, we want status, we want knowledge. We want love, we want to avoid pain, we want to avoid death. But here's the trap. Desire is always oriented toward the future. You want something you do not have. While you lack it, you suffer. When you achieve it, the satisfaction lasts only a moment. Then the desire is replaced by a new desire. The cycle never ends. While searching, you suffer. You find water and drink. For a moment, the suffering stops. But the absence of suffering is not positive pleasure. It is merely the removal of pain. And within minutes or hours, a new desire arises. You become hungry. The whole cycle starts again. Fulfillment of desire is not the achievement of happiness. It is only the temporary cessation of a particular suffering. Most desires are never fulfilled. And those that are fulfilled are instantly replaced. Life is a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. Pain when desires are unfulfilled. Boredom when desires are temporarily satisfied and you have nothing to strive for. This is existence. This is what it means to be will. An endless, aimless, insatiable striving. If you value documented philosophy that traces intellectual transformations through primary sources and personal experience like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. Also, this script is researched and factual, using sources from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, specifically their extensive Schopenhauer entry, which was last updated in May 2003, and draws from Schopenhauer's original manuscripts and letters held at university archives, and from peer-reviewed articles published in the British Journal for the History of Philosophy, Volume 31, Number 5, in 2023. Examining Schopenhauer's inner awareness arguments through close textual analysis of the world as will and representation sections 19 through 21. Now, back to the information. It simply wills. The individual human thinks he has goals. He wants a house, a career, a family. He thinks if he achieves these, he will be happy. But happiness never comes. Because underneath those specific desires is the will itself, which is infinite. No finite achievement can satisfy an infinite drive. You're trying to fill a bottomless pit. Every satisfaction reveals a new emptiness. This is why the rich are not happy. Why the successful are not happy. Why even those who achieve everything they thought they wanted still feel something missing. Because what is missing is not an external thing. What is missing is the end of desire itself. And that end is impossible as long as you live, because life is will. Plants choking each other out for sunlight. The violence and suffering built into every level of nature. This is not a flaw, it is the essence. The will is in conflict with itself. Each organism is a manifestation of will trying to seize matter and energy from other manifestations of will. The wolf eating the deer is will consuming will. The deer fleeing is will trying to preserve itself against will. The entire spectacle of nature is will devouring itself eternally. Humans are just more conscious versions of this. We have language and reason, which allow us to pursue desires more effectively, but also to multiply desires endlessly. We do not just want food. We want gourmet food. We do not just want shelter. We want luxury. We do not just want sex. We want love, romance, a validation. We do not just want survival. We want meaning, purpose, immortality. Each layer of consciousness adds new layers of suffering. Students ignored his lectures. He felt bitter. But he also recognized this as confirmation of his philosophy. Of course, achievement brings no satisfaction. Of course, the world does not reward insight or truth. The will is blind. It has no interest in philosophy or wisdom. It cares only for reproduction and survival. The university students flocked to Hegel, not because Hegel was right, but because Hegel told them what they wanted to hear. That history progresses, that reason rules, that human civilization is advancing toward perfection. These are comforting lies. Schopenhauer offered the opposite. Reality is irrational. History goes nowhere. Human nature does not change. Suffering is built into existence. Of course, nobody wanted to hear it. He returned to Munich in 1823. He lived in Mannheim in 1824, then Dresden. In 1825, he returned to Berlin. He tried to lecture again. Again, nobody came. In 1831, a cholera epidemic hit Berlin. Hegel died in the epidemic in November 1831. Schopenhauer fled the city. He moved to Frankfurt am Main. He would live there for the rest of his life. 29 years in Frankfurt, alone except for a succession of pet poodles. He named them Atma and Butz. Atma is the Sanskrit word for the self from the Upanishads. He had a strict daily routine. Wake early, study and write in the morning, play the flute. Lunch at a specific inn called the Englischer Hof in the city center. Rest, read, walk in the afternoon, check news in the London Times, sometimes attend concerts. Read the Apnikat before sleep, every day the same. A monastic life devoted to thought. The Royal Norwegian Society of Sciences in Trondheim held an essay competition. Schopenhauer submitted. He won first prize, first recognition in 20 years. In 1840, he wrote another essay on the basis of morality. The Royal Danish Society of Sciences held a competition. Schopenhauer submitted. He was the only submission. They refused to award him the prize. They said he did not answer the question properly, and that he disrespected famous philosophers, meaning Fichte and Hegel. In 1841, he published both essays together as two fundamental problems of ethics. In the preface, he attacked the Danish Academy. His bitterness is visible. When you want something, what is happening? Not the specific object of desire, not the thoughts about why you want it, but the wanting itself, the raw urge, the drive. That is will. That is the thing in itself becoming conscious. Now recognize that this will is not yours. It predates your birth. It will continue after your death. Your body grew from a single cell without your conscious direction. Your heart beats without your decision. You did not choose to be hungry or tired or aroused. These drives arise from the will, which is using your body as its instrument. You are not the master. You are the servant. Or more accurately, you are the vehicle. The will is driving. Consciousness is just along for the ride, observing, rationalizing, but not controlling. Everyone thinks they are making choices, pursuing their own interests, but everyone is driven by the same blind will. The criminal and the saint are both expressions of will in conflict with itself. Now extend it further. Animals. Your dog wants food, wants play, wants comfort. The same structure as human desire, just simpler. The bird building a nest, the spider spinning a web, the salmon swimming upstream to spawn and die. All manifestations of will. Now inorganic matter. The magnet pulling iron, the rock pulled by gravity, the chemical reaction seeking equilibrium. Even here will, not conscious will, but the same fundamental force objectified at a simpler level. Everything in the universe is will manifesting in different forms. The entire cosmos is a single, unified, blind, unconscious, aimless striving. It means the world you perceive is not the real world. Space, time, causality, separate objects. These are forms imposed by your perceiving apparatus. The real world, the thing in itself, is will. Undivided, eternal, without purpose. The appearance of multiplicity is an illusion. You think you're a separate individual, but separation only exists in representation. At the level of will, you are identical with everything. The person you love is will. The person you hate is will. The animal you kill for food is will. You are all one. The boundaries are illusion. This is why Schopenhauer said that individuality is Maya. Your sense of being a separate self is a trick of perception. Your body individuates a portion of will, gives it a temporary form, but the will within you is the same will in everything else. When you suffer, your suffering is the whole world. When you harm another, you are harming yourself, not metaphorically, literally, because there's only one will. Count the moments of pain, frustration, anxiety, boredom. They dominate. Even when you are not actively suffering, you are striving, planning, worrying, wanting. The absence of acute pain is not happiness. At best, it is neutral, and neutral quickly becomes boredom, which is itself a form of suffering. The pendulum never stops. The only escape is to stop wanting. But can you stop wanting? Schopenhauer explores this question in the second half of his system. When the aesthetic experience ends, desire returns. So, aesthetic experience is not a solution. It is a brief respite. Music, for Schopenhauer, is special. Music does not represent objects in the world. Music represents will itself. The ebb and flow, the tension and resolution, the longing and satisfaction in music mirror the structure of will. Listening to music is experiencing the will directly, but at a distance, without the pain. This is why music moves us so deeply. It is the will contemplating itself. You develop sympathy, kindness, gentleness. This is the beginning of denying the will. You are no longer affirming your individual existence at the expense of others. But even compassion is not the final step. The final step is asceticism, complete renunciation. You stop pursuing desires, you stop seeking pleasure, you minimize your needs. You live simply, quietly, detached from the world. You let the will in you starve. Without fuel, without goals, without affirmation, the will weakens. And in that weakening, there is peace. They recognized life as suffering and chose not to participate. This is what he called the denial of the will to live, not suicide. Suicide is an act of will, a violent affirmation of individual existence. Denial is the opposite. Quiet, patient, gentle withdrawal, letting go, accepting, ceasing to resist. When you stop wanting, suffering stops. The world remains as it is, but you're no longer caught in it. You observe it without being moved. You experience it without being harmed. This is liberation. This is the only true happiness, which is not happiness, but the absence of suffering, nothingness, emptiness, nirvana. And just to emphasize, this is deeply researched material drawing from multiple Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy articles on Schopenhauer updated as recently as 2003 and 2020, scholarly articles from the British Journal for the History of Philosophy examining Schopenhauer's phenomenological arguments from 2023, and Ursapp's archival research published in downloadable PDFs from the university. Of Mainz philosophy department examining Schopenhauer's library records from Weimar, showing exact borrowing dates of texts like the Opnikat on March 26, 1814. Now, back to the information. In August 1821, a seamstress named Caroline Louise Marquet had an argument outside his Berlin apartment. She was loud. Schopenhauer pushed her down the stairs. She injured her arm. She sued him. The case dragged on for years. Eventually, he was forced to pay her compensation for the rest of her life. When she finally died decades later, he wrote in his diary, "The old woman dies, the burden departs." This is not the writing of a saint. He was irritable, arrogant, difficult. He kept loaded pistols by his bed for fear of thieves. He dined alone daily at the same table in the same inn. He was suspicious of people. He had few friends. He never married. He had no children. He lived entirely in his mind. From 1814, when he first read the Upnikat, to 1859, when he published the third expanded edition of The World as Will and Representation, the core insight never changed. Reality is will. Desire is suffering. Liberation comes through denial. For decades, nobody listened. Then something shifted. In 1851, he published a collection of essays and reflections called Parerga and Paralipomena. Appendices and omissions in Greek. These were shorter pieces, more accessible than his main work. One essay was called On University Philosophy, attacking academic philosophers. Another was called The Wisdom of Life, offering practical advice. Another was The Art of Controversy, teaching how to argue and win debates. The style was sharp, clear, often sarcastic. In 1853, a review appeared in the Westminster Review in London. The review was unsigned but written by John Oxenford. The title was Iconoclasm in German Philosophy. It praised Schopenhauer's originality, his clarity, his courage to challenge the dominant idealism of Fichte and Hegel. The review drew parallels between Schopenhauer and Fichte's ideas, but argued Schopenhauer was more honest. Students sought him out. Intellectuals wrote to him. At age 65, after 40 years of obscurity, he became famous. He received visitors. He was invited to events. Newspapers interviewed him. By 1859, when the third edition of his book was published, he was recognized as one of the most important philosophers of the century. He had 1 year left to enjoy it. On September 21st, 1860, he died peacefully in his apartment in Frankfurt. The address was Schöne Aussicht 16, Beautiful View 16. He was 72 years old. He died sitting in his chair after breakfast. His doctor found him an hour later. Notice the difference between perceiving it from outside and feeling it from inside. Recognize that the inner feeling is will. Desire, drive, urge. Extend this insight to all existence. Everything is will manifesting. Then examine desire itself. Notice that it is never satisfied. Notice that fulfillment brings no lasting happiness. Notice that the cycle never ends. Notice that even what you call pleasure is just the brief absence of a particular pain. Then ask whether this is how you want to live. In constant striving and endless dissatisfaction, driven by a force you do not control. If the answer is no, the path is clear. Stop affirming the will. Stop pursuing desires. Simplify, withdraw, let go. This is not depression. It is clarity, seeing existence as it is and choosing not to be enslaved by it. The vision is stark. Schopenhauer offers no comfort, no afterlife, no cosmic justice, no progress, no meaning, just the blind, aimless, eternal striving of will. And yet, there is something liberating in the starkness. If existence has no purpose, you are freed from the obligation to fulfill one. If desire is endless, you can stop chasing satisfaction. If individuality is illusion, you can stop defending your ego. If the world is suffering, you can stop pretending otherwise. You can face reality without flinching. And in that facing, there is a kind of peace, not happiness. Peace, the peace of no longer wanting what you cannot have. The peace of accepting what is. The peace of letting the will exhaust itself while you observe from a distance. Friedrich Nietzsche read Schopenhauer in 1865, 5 years after Schopenhauer's death. Nietzsche was 21. He called it a life-changing experience. Nietzsche later rejected Schopenhauer's pessimism and denial of life, but the structure of his thought remained Schopenhauerian. The idea that the world is fundamentally irrational, that consciousness is secondary to drive, that truth is hard and most people avoid it. Sigmund Freud read Schopenhauer. The idea of the unconscious, of drives beneath awareness, of repression and sublimation, all echo Schopenhauer. Carl Jung read him. The collective unconscious, the archetypes, the idea of a deeper reality beneath individual consciousness. Ludwig Wittgenstein read him. The idea that language shapes thought, that what can be said is limited, that some truths can only be shown, not stated. Richard Wagner read him and was deeply influenced. Wagner's operas explore the same themes: desire, illusion, redemption through renunciation. Leo Tolstoy read him. The late Tolstoy, who renounced wealth and fame and lived as a peasant, was living Schopenhauer's philosophy. The recognition that existence precedes essence, that humans are thrust into a world without inherent meaning, that we must choose how to live in the face of absurdity. Schopenhauer said this 80 years before Sartre. Contemporary philosophers still debate him. Is the will really the thing in itself? Is pessimism justified? Can we know anything about reality independent of representation? Is compassion really the ethical response to recognizing our metaphysical unity? These questions remain open, but the mental process stands: the movement from external observation to internal awareness, the recognition that what you feel inside is more fundamental than what you perceive outside, the extension of that insight to all of existence, the analysis of desire as the root of suffering, the exploration of escape through aesthetic experience, compassion, and renunciation. Not an intellectual game, but a confrontation with existence itself. And he did it by paying attention, by looking carefully at his own experience, by asking what desire actually feels like, where it comes from, what it does to us, by refusing to accept comfortable answers, by following the logic wherever it led, even when it led to uncomfortable conclusions. A man in his mid-20s, living alone, reading obsessively, thinking obsessively, taking walks, writing. The Upnikat, open on his desk, Kant's critique of pure reason marked up with notes, the ideas slowly assembling, the recognition building, the whole system crystallizing. By March 1818, he had it. 2,000 pages of philosophy compressed into a single insight. Reality is will. The world is representation. We are trapped by desire. Liberation is possible through renunciation. He wrote it out clearly, systematically, comprehensively. He published it. He waited for the world to recognize the truth. The world ignored him for 40 years, but the truth did not change. The insight remained. And eventually, slowly it spread. Translated into every major language, studied in universities worldwide, cited by psychologists, neuroscientists, writers, artists, the pessimistic philosopher became one of the most influential thinkers of modernity, not because he offered hope, because he offered honesty. He looked at existence without blinking. He described what he saw. He did not soften it. He did not lie. He said life is suffering. Desire is insatiable. Satisfaction is impossible. Death is annihilation. And yet we cling to existence. We affirm the will. We reproduce. We build. We strive. Knowing it is futile. This is the human condition. Schopenhauer mapped it. He showed the mechanism. He explained why we suffer and why we cannot stop suffering as long as we want to live. Let the will in you die, not through violence, but through starvation. Withdraw your energy from the world. Stop chasing. Stop resisting. Observe, accept, detach. In that detachment, in that radical letting go, suffering ends. Not because circumstances change, because you stop being moved by them. You become like a mirror. The world passes before you. You reflect it, but you are not touched. This is what the mystics knew. This is what the Upanishads taught. This is what Schopenhauer rediscovered through a careful examination of his own inner experience, combined with the insights of Kant and the wisdom of ancient India. Third, recognize that what you fundamentally are is will. It's the force that drives your body, that generates your desires, that animates your existence. Fourth, recognize that this will is not individual. It is universal. You share it with all beings. Fifth, recognize that will is suffering. As long as you identify with will, you will suffer. Sixth, recognize that identification is optional. You can observe the will without being it. Seventh, practice this observation. Aesthetic contemplation, compassion, renunciation. Eighth, gradually, through practice, the identification weakens. Desires lose their grip. Suffering decreases. Ninth, in rare moments or sustained states, complete detachment occurs. You are free. Not free to do what you want, free from wanting. But that meaning is a human construct imposed on a meaningless reality. Once you stop imposing meaning, stop demanding satisfaction, stop insisting that existence owes you happiness, you can see clearly. You can accept. And in acceptance, paradoxically, there is a kind of joy. Not the joy of getting what you want, the joy of no longer needing anything, the joy of pure being, without striving, without agenda, without fear. A joy that does not depend on circumstances, a joy that survives even in suffering, because it is not the opposite of suffering. It is the space in which both suffering and pleasure arise and pass without clinging. On his desk were his notes, his books, the Upnikat with its Latin gibberish and Sanskrit terms mixed with Persian, his flute on the shelf, his walking stick by the door, his poodle Atma wandering the apartment. Shona Aussicht 16. The apartment overlooked the main river, a beautiful view. He spent 27 years in Frankfurt, 27 years of routine, discipline, work, writing, revising, clarifying, defending his insights against critics, enjoying finally in the last decade recognition, fame, students, correspondence, visitors. The satisfaction, he said, was impossible. But even that satisfaction he knew was temporary. Another desire fulfilled, another emptiness revealed, the wheel turning, the will striving, until it stops. His books were sold, his furniture auctioned, his papers went to Julius Frauenstedt, his literary executor. Frauenstedt published new editions of the works. 6 volumes appeared in 1873. By then, Schopenhauer was canonical. Universities taught him. Philosophers debated him. His grave in the Frankfurt Main Cemetery became a pilgrimage site. The headstone is simple. Arthur Schopenhauer, philosopher, born 1788. Died 1860. No epitaph, no motto, just the name and the dates, exactly as he would have wanted. No pretense, no claim to meaning, just the facts. A man lived. A man thought. A man died. The will continued. The representations changed. The underlying reality remained the same, blind, unconscious, eternal, aimless, until you stop participating, until you see through it, until you let go. This is what he discovered in Dresden between 1814 and 1818. This is the mental process he went through, from reading an incomprehensible Latin text, translated from Persian, translated from Sanskrit, to recognizing the will in his own body, to extending that recognition to all existence, to analyzing desire as suffering, to mapping the path from affirmation to denial, from slavery to freedom, from striving to peace. It took 4 years of solitude and study. It took the rest of his life to defend and clarify. But the core insight came in that window. A young man in his 20s, alone in Dresden, walking the streets, reading by candlelight, thinking, until suddenly the pieces fit. The world made sense. Not a comforting sense, not a hopeful sense, but sense. Reality seen clearly, the thing in itself identified. The nature of existence revealed, and with that revelation, the possibility of escape, not into another world, not into delusion, but into clear-eyed acceptance, into the recognition that the only prison is wanting, and the only key is to stop. Mapped, explained, defended with arguments and evidence drawn from introspection and observation and the wisdom traditions of both East and West. You do not need to believe. You can test it. Look at your own desire. Examine it honestly. See whether fulfillment brings lasting happiness. See whether the cycle of wanting and getting and wanting again ever ends. See whether you are in control or whether something deeper drives you. See whether individuality is as solid as it seems or whether it dissolves under scrutiny. See whether compassion arises when you recognize your identity with all beings. See whether letting go brings peace. See whether renunciation is possible. See for yourself. That is Schopenhauer's final instruction. Do not take his word. Look, think, understand. And if what you find matches what he describes, then you know the truth. Not because a philosopher said it, because you saw it yourself. Which means cessation of existence, not through death but through withdrawal, through becoming a spectator instead of a participant, through seeing without wanting, through accepting without resisting, through letting the will exhaust itself while you watch from stillness. This is the wisdom. This is the liberation. This is the mental process Arthur Schopenhauer went through to understand desire. And this is how it changes reality once you see it, not the external world. That remains the same. The change is internal. You stop being fooled. You stop being driven. You stop being enslaved. You become free. Not free to do whatever you want, free from wanting, which is the only freedom that matters, the only freedom that lasts, the only freedom that survives death itself, because it is not the freedom of the individual will. It is the freedom from will entirely, the recognition that what you are is not will at all. What you are is consciousness, pure awareness, observing the will, watching the world, not caught in it, not defined by it, just watching, silently, peacefully, eternally,